Start with the latest out of the Justice Department's search of former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence. Sources telling Bloomberg that, quote, federal prosecutors are likely to wait until after the November election to announce any charges against Donald Trump if they determine he broke laws. The question of whether the former president was keeping classified documents at his personal home in Florida seems to have been answered late last night with a visual aid. A photo released in a court filing by the DOJ late last night shows a series of items retrieved from various locations at Mar-a-Lago, notably many labeled secret and even more labeled top secret. NewsNation senior correspondent Brian Anton is in Palm Beach, Florida tonight with more. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, we expected that late night filing from the DOJ. What we did not expect was them to include that photo where you saw all of those top secret documents on the floor. Just within the last couple of hours, the former president got on Truth Social and said he wanted to make clear that it was the FBI agents who put them all over the floor like that. A 36-page filing from the Department of Justice full of new details into the criminal investigation involving former President Trump. And even this picture was included that shows documents laid out during the FBI search warrant. Some are labeled top secret.
To me, the response that the government filed late last night was one of the most powerful and damning pieces that I've seen connected to this case.
The DOJ claims the former president had no right to have the classified documents because they do not belong to him, and the United States has complete ownership, possession, and control of them. In the months leading up to the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, the DOJ says Trump's team returned some secret documents, but that the government has also developed evidence that government records were likely concealed and removed from the storage room, and that efforts were likely taken to obstruct the government's investigation. Former President Trump's attorneys have argued he had the power to declassify the documents. Trump took issue with the photo released by the DOJ, writing on Truth Social, "There seems to be confusion as to the picture where documents were sloppily thrown on the floor and then released photographically for the world to see, as if that's what the FBI found when they broke into my home. Wrong. They took them out of cartons and spread them around on the carpet, making it look like a big find for them. They dropped them, not me, very deceiving, and remember, we could have no representative, including lawyers, present during the raid. They were told to wait outside." Why is it important to show that some of the former president's personal items, like for example, his passport, were in with some of these confidential documents?
The location and placement of personal documents or items within the confines of locations and places where confidential documents are stored, records are stored, items that they're seeking to get back, plays an important role in showing who it was had access to that location.
And what he said there is really very, very interesting, because a lot of people wondered, why would the FBI be interested in the passports and other personal items belonging to Trump? But what they're trying to show is that if those items were in the same area as the confidential documents, they're trying to make the point that would then mean that Trump knew those confidential documents were there. Mike?
Okay, Brian, tomorrow, another big day in court in this ongoing case. This is the special master request, I believe, that the president and his lawyers requested of the court, that neutral third party, to look through some of these documents. What can we expect tomorrow in that hearing?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, sort of a big day with all of this. 1 p.m., the hearing will be here in federal court in Palm Beach County. You mentioned it. All of this centers around whether or not a special master should be appointed. Obviously, Trump has been saying, I need a special master because I believe some of these documents are privileged and also attorney-client privilege, and I want an outsider to go through all of these documents. So the judge will decide tomorrow at 1 o'clock. What I find interesting is this is really the first time we'll hear the Trump lawyers in court arguing their side. In the past, it's been the DOJ and the lawyers representing the media, but tomorrow we'll hear from the Trump lawyers.
All right, another big day. You've got a front row seat there on the Intercoastal across from Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. Brian, thank you very much. Okay, the fact that the Justice Department is playing it safe against any indication of political interference may suggest a bigger issue at hand. We all, of course, remember when former FBI Director James Comey revealed that the agency was reopening a probe into Hillary Clinton's emails just days before the 2016 election, a move that many believe cost Hillary Clinton of victory and the White House. A NewsNation poll out in the last week shows that nearly half of Americans, 43%, do not have trust in the Justice Department, while at the same time, 61% of Americans approve of the FBI's raid or search of Mar-a-Lago. So joining me now is the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute, Jamil Jaffer, who's worked on counterterrorism and intelligence issues on Capitol Hill, the Justice Department, and the White House. Jamil, thanks so much for being here. First of all,
Absolutely.
What do you make of reports that the Justice Department may hold off pressing charges, whatever they may be, against former President Trump until after the election? So do you think that there were any lessons learned from that episode with Comey and Hillary Clinton before the 2016 election?
Well, certainly they're trying to avoid any concern that they might be engaging in political behavior to affect the outcome of an election. And so they're obviously, chastened by what happened during the 2016 elections and are making moves to be more cautious in that sense. That being said, obviously, we've already seen unprecedented activity, a search of a former president's home pursuant to a federal search warrant, and the now disclosure of materials related to that search warrant, the warrant itself, the underlying parts of the underlying affidavit requested by the president, and now additional filings and additional materials based on the president's request for a special master.
Right. And so, but this announcement by DOJ, or this report of an announcement or a decision, 60 days out from an election, they will not bring any charges. Is there a precedent for this sort of thing, aside from the email case in 2016? Or is the 60-day rule a written policy or just an unspoken policy?
Well, I'm not aware of any written policy that DOJ will not take action within 60 days of an election. But I do think that as a sort of an advisory matter, it makes sense to operate in that manner and to be cautious around the timing of an election. You don't want federal charges to affect an election. Now, look, if the charges have to be brought because there's something that needs to be done, then it's important to bring them. If you have time and there's the ability to wait and be more cautious, it makes sense for the Justice Department to do that just in order to protect the rule of law, the reputation and providence of the FBI itself and the Justice Department as well, of which the FBI is a part. I think that's an important thing to do. And obviously, they saw what happened. They saw the criticism. They've seen the criticism recently. And I think they're responding to that. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for them to be aware and cognizant of that and trying to protect the rule of law in this country.
Sure. Okay. So do you think basically the 60-day rule, if it's true, would be good news for the former president, or could it be somehow worse, since people will just be wildly speculating, especially after the photo and those documents on the floor were released last night?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure how this cuts in terms of the former president's efforts. Thus far, things that I think people generally expected would be harmful to the president, the fact that he had these classified documents, that the Justice Department had to go get a search warrant for them, have actually appeared to have strengthened him amongst his base, in the sense that his base has taken the view that he's under pressure from the Justice Department, that they're unlawfully in law. You've seen Republicans in Congress defend him. So, in a lot of ways, it actually seems to have worked in his favor, even though what we're seeing may be evidence potentially of improper behavior, maybe even criminal behavior.
Right. And doesn't the DOJ realistically need more than possessing these documents to bring whatever charges they're considering bringing against the former president? I mean, could you, I don't want to ask you to speculate too much, but what conceivably, and everything you've seen so far in the court documents, the highly unusual nature of this investigation and the search, what do you think they're thinking in terms of potential charges?
Well, I think there are two major charges we can talk about, three, right? There's the one, which is the Espionage Act. And the relevant part of that is that you had documents relevant to the national security, the national defense. You knew you had them. You were asked for them and you didn't give them back, right? They seem to think that's one of the interesting charges they could bring. Now, this most recent filing, though, suggests they have a potential charge on obstruction, right? The idea that documents were intentionally removed from that storage room, moved elsewhere. The fact that the FBI found documents in the president's office, right, might suggest an effort to obstruct. And then finally, the most vanilla of charges might be something related to the Federal Records Act, improper storage or retention of documents under the Federal Records Act or the Presidential Records Act. So those are the three major statutes that might be in play here.
Okay. Well, one other quick topic. When we're talking about the Department of Justice, the Attorney General Merrick Garland issued a memo to staff this week banning them from political events heading into this election ahead of the midterms, as the Department and the FBI are under fire, particularly from Trump supporters. This feels like a PR move on one hand. On the other hand, it feels like common sense to me that you would keep people away from political events who work for the Department of Justice and the FBI. What do you think is going on here? Is this kind of a PR move, or is this just sort of a common sense, good policy move?
Well, as a general matter, certain senior level folks at the Justice Department and prosecutors are generally under what's called the Old Hatch Act, which bars you from engaging in most forms of political activity other than voting. And what the AG has done as a matter of policy is extended that to all Justice Department employees in an effort to address the very real criticism that they've faced here in the aftermath of this search, this unprecedented search. And so I think he's responding in part to that. You know, whether it's a PR move or not, it's probably a smart move in the sense that they are under significant amount of fire because of the decisions they've made to go down this road, whether right or wrong, they are under a lot of fire.
Absolutely. Okay, Jamil Jaffer, thank you. We're all going to be watching 1 o'clock tomorrow in court. That special master case going to be heard. Okay.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.